Take out noisy babies. If you have to have a conversation, please, there's bathrooms there and the hallway down there if you need some privacy. And then if you have questions, which I imagine you will, please hold those comments, questions to the very end. And there'll be time one-on-one to speak with our tonight's speakers. And anyone else you want to chat and visit with, you are welcome to do that after the closing prayer. So we'll go ahead and start tonight with our opening prayer that's going to be offered by Larry Olson. Thank you, Larry.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful to be here this evening. We're grateful for thy Son and the Holy Spirit, which we're able to enjoy during our lifetime here on earth. We're grateful for the promptings we received as individuals. We're grateful that for all the people that are here this evening to seek out the truth and be aware of the truths that may be covered up or not promoted by the mainstream. We ask you to be with us during this meeting, that all will go well, and for the rest of the evening as well as the week, and be with each one of us. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you so much. Okay, I will briefly introduce our sponsors of tonight's event. Defending Utah is a leading local organization, a community of activists working to educate citizens on true principles, restoring a culture of liberty, and exposing those conspiring to take away our freedoms. The objective of the Ezra Taft Benson Society is to promote an understanding of our civic responsibilities, the threat of secret combinations, and the principles of liberty and good government in light of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. So tonight you guys are in for a special program. We're going to have two Defending Utah members address you tonight. We'll first be hearing from Kevin Poulsen, the conspiracy surrounding 9/11 and the details of the what that happened. And then after he speaks, we'll be immediately turn the remainder of the time over to Micah Turner, who'll be sharing the aftermath and ramifications of 9/11, kind of more on the why it matters. So after tonight's speakers are finished, I would ask that you please remain seated for the closing prayer. As I said earlier, you're definitely invited to stay and visit afterwards. And again, please hold comments and questions until you can be one-on-one with our speakers. Okay, now to introduce our first speaker for tonight. Kevin Poulsen is a mechanical engineer with an MS from BYU. What's an MS?
Master of Science.
Masters of Science, okay. And worked with such companies as Cummins Engine Company, Raytheon Missile Systems, L3 Communications, and is currently working in the business development in the motion and controls industry. He taught 3 years as a capstone coach for BYU's mechanical engineering department. He brings real-world experience into why what the government has told us for the last 20 years cannot be believed. I'll go ahead and introduce our second speaker. Micah Turner helped to build a new world order for 5 years in the U.S. Marine Corps. I love that line. He has since then dedicated his life to understanding liberty and how to defend it. Micah is an entrepreneur and a small business owner. He joined Defending Utah in 2016 as a regular co-host on Defending Utah Productions. So you can find those on YouTube and K-Talk, actually Monday and Tuesday mornings from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. You can check out Micah when he co-hosts. So without further ado, let's get started. Please join me now in welcoming Kevin Poulsen to speak with us.
Okay, can you hear me pretty well on this? Looks like that's making noise. All right. Well, the conspiracy's at work already. Oh. All right, I thought I would title this presentation something a little bit that's been sticking in my mind, maybe a little controversial. I called it Gateway Drug to Conspiracy, and I know that's it's kind of out there, but the reason I believe that is because there's so much evidence about 9/11 that if you're gonna learn about secret combinations and what's really going on, you really should look into that first. And so when I talk to friends about combinations and secret groups and secret societies and things like that and evidence, I go to 9/11 first. Because if they can't swallow that, then they're probably not going to get anything.
For sure.
And that picture, I'll explain that a little bit as we go, but that has some significance to the day. Let's see if this mouse click does the job. Maybe not. Well, that's okay, because Brian can do it for me.
Try it again.
Okay, let's try it. Is that working? No? Oh, there it goes. All right, well, just a little bit about me, and Samantha did a pretty good job of explaining. I've been in the mechanical engineering field for 22 years, worked in a lot of different places. Right now I do business development and sales actually, but it's technical and I still use my degree, so that's been great. I actually am not unique in knowing what I know about 9/11. It turns out I probably know 1,000 engineers or so, and I only know a handful that believe the official story. I've lived in Utah for 25 years, and I joined 9/11 Truth, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and I signed the petition because I want to help others learn what really happened on 9/11. Let's see, is this something I can adjust? I guess it is what it is. Okay. Let's go ahead and I'll just try clicking, see if that works. There we go. Okay, Brian's doing it for me. So Dr. Stephen Jones from BYU, you might recognize his name. About 07, 08, I started becoming interested in this stuff. And prior to that, I thought the conspiracy theorists were crazy. And he was presenting at UVSC, and I happened to stumble across a YouTube where he presented. This is a snapshot from that. And that was in 08. And he was talking about Building 7, and it really piqued my interest because of several things that were red flags, namely Building 7, which was not hit by an airplane. Fires had never before caused the collapse of any steel skyscraper in history until that day, and it happened 3 times. And free fall, that was really interesting to me. I thought, my goodness, you know, I know a little something about gravity, and it's really simple. Any high school physics student can tell you that, at least in a vacuum, everything falls on Earth at 32 feet per second, and that's its acceleration. That's what the building did for 100 feet. And it did it straight down into its own footprint. Molten steel in the buildings, that's really hard to explain with office fires. And that's what the official story is. Office fires brought down Building 7. So I'm going to focus more on Building 7 than the other towers, but they're all significant, of course. Next slide. So we're going to break this presentation up into 3 categories. The government's official conspiracy theory, because they do say it's a conspiracy of 19 hijackers, and evidence from independent researchers like Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. We're going to talk about the political impact and the physical results as well. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about the official conspiracy theory of 9/11. And there's a little humor in this video, but it's not, it's actually well backed up when you look into it. And you can see the links on on the Corbett report. That's what this is from. So go ahead and play it.
September 11th, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These
Brian's clicking.
These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York, while in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon low-budget analyst office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes. Osama bin Laden. The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, Oberol and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
Nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her, and her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about
His hip could be seen to move violently forward.
and
They took the babies out of incubators.
and
Mobile production facilities.
and
The rescue of Jessica Lynch.
if you have any questions about this story, you are a bad, paranoid, tinfoil, dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever. This has been a public service announcement by the Friends of the FBI, CIA, NSA, DIA, SEC, NSM, White House, NIST, and the 9/11 Commission. because ignorance is strength.
Yeah, it sounds like not that many of you have seen that before. It's heavily censored, I'll say that. Okay, go ahead, next slide. Oh, there we go. Okay, so with any lie, a great deal of programming is required to sell it to the public. Let's review what the debunkers, fact checkers, and false whistleblowers had to say. I watched a National Geographic special when I was preparing for this. They said, this far out, no one has been able to provide a single piece of evidence that those buildings were explosively demolished. And this was in '09. So they're wrong about that. Next slide. Popular Mechanics, you're probably familiar with a number of articles that they wrote. They talked about, in the most recent one, damage to the lobby, molten steel, squibs going off, seismic activity, fuel oil fires, and they basically tried to debunk everything. They said that WTC 7, that's World Trade Center's Building 7, might have withstood the physical damage it received or the fire that burned for hours, but those combined factors, along with the building's unusual construction, were enough to set off a chain reaction collapse. And they're not kidding when they talk about chain reaction. We have our favorite whistleblower, Snowden. I used to be a fan of his. But if you ask him about 9/11, he'll deny that it's any kind of conspiracy. He'll toe the official line. With Brian Williams, he said he actually signed up for service because of it. Next slide. The Mythbusters, right? Wouldn't it be great if they did this? But they won't take any conspiracies and they say, you can't prove a negative. Okay, go ahead and play. There's a little montage of some of these things happening.
I was on Fort Meade on September 11th. I was right outside the NSA. So I remember the tension of that day. I remember hearing on the radio the planes hitting. And I remember thinking my grandfather, who worked for the FBI at the time, was in the Pentagon when the plane hit it. I take the threat of terrorism seriously.
It's difficult to do overarching conspiracy theories because you can't prove a negative. We understood that early on in our show. If you go and try and find Bigfoot and you don't find Bigfoot, the only thing you've proved is that you don't know how to find Bigfoot.
This far out, no one has been able to provide a single piece of evidence that those buildings were explosively demolished.
Okay. Pretty sad. Building 7 is the third tower to fall on 9/11. Many people don't even know about it. Oftentimes when I show it to people, they say, I've never seen that before. And I'm not surprised because I hadn't either up until I watched Professor Jones. Media doesn't like to show it fall on TV because it looks like a controlled demolition. 47-story steel frame skyscrapers. It was a 47-story steel frame skyscraper. It was not hit by an airplane. It fell into its own footprint at free fall, 32 feet per second. And no steel frame building has ever fallen due to fire except for the 3 towers on 9/11. I'll be repeating myself a few times because there's some very important things that if you only take them home tonight, don't forget them. Okay, next slide. Oh, I've got the clicker. Look at that, power. Let's see if it works. Do I have to point it? No. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Look at that. Very cool. Okay, this is a fun video. It turns out it's actually really hard to drop a building. They pay people a lot of money to do it. And I found some demolitions that didn't go so well online. My father is a physicist, and he's been telling me when I started waking up to 9/11 and what really went on, I told him, hey, I think these are controlled demolitions. And he was kind of shocked. And then he dug into it and he agrees with me. But he's always telling me that they don't show controlled demolitions very often on TV anymore. I think with a good reason. They don't want you to notice what it looks like. So without further ado, enjoy this. When your friends are doing it, it doesn't work out. Yeah, sometimes they don't go down. Now this
Until the buildings did not completely collapse, they then had to go back to plant additional explosives to bring the towers down.
Okay, so now you can see, compared to building 7, what a normal demolition is.
For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
Symmetrically it falls.
Did they actually use the word drop down, or who was that was telling you this? The fire department, and they did use the word, we're gonna have to bring it down.
This sound sounded like a clap of thunder. It looked like there was a shockwave ripping through the building, and the windows all busted out. About a second later, the bottom floor caved out. The building followed after that, and we saw the building crash down all the way to the ground. And I turned in time to see what looked like a skyscraper implosion. It looked like it had been done by a demolition crew. The whole thing just collapsing down on itself. It was almost as if it were a planned implosion. It just pancaked.
Okay. And let's get into more depth. The NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and they were tasked by the 9/11 Commission to investigate the building failures. They had a budget of 16 million and teams of experts. And of course, oh, you all right? They have labs, they have lots of many years of expertise, centuries of expertise. They released their final report in 2008, and just prior to that, they released a draft, and they actually opened it up for commentary, which was a mistake on their part because they got an earful. So they said it was a fire-induced progressive collapse. What they mean by that is fire alone led to the collapse, and it was complete. The buckling failure of column 79 between floor 5 and floor 14 was the initiating event that led to the global collapse of World Trade Center 7. This resulted from thermal expansion and failures of connections, beams, and girders in the adjacent floor systems. They said, this is all from the report. This was the first known instance of the total collapse of a tall building primarily due to fires. At least they admit it. A free fall descent over approximately 8 stories. They eventually put into the report, but it was not in the draft. They fudged some numbers actually on the falling of the building, and a high school physics teacher, I'll talk about him a little bit more, caught it, brought it up in the review of the draft, and they had to change it. That was a big deal. Okay, so officially they claim that a single column collapse dragged the whole building down. That is impossible. That's never going to happen. It's totally ridiculous. But it's even more ridiculous when you listen to the cascade of unfortunate events that had to happen in order for that one column to fall off its girder and drag the whole building down. And so here's Ron Engel, a civil engineer, talking with architect Richard Gage of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth about that series of events. Okay, here he goes.
The NIST collapse initiation theory starts with the 13th floor and starts in the northwest corner of the building with these 5 beams that frame into this girder, A2001, that runs between column 79 and column 44. And they say that the thermal effects on those beams cause them to expand and contract later. And that either pushed or pulled this girder off of its seat and caused it to collapse. And that collapse on the 13th floor caused the girder to hit the next floor down, the 12th floor down. And that in turn caused a cascade of these beams in this area all the way down to the 5th floor. And that caused the column 79 to buckle because it was unsupported for such a long distance. And that in turn led to the buckling of 80 and 81, led to these 3, 76 through 78 buckling, and the collapse proceeding from east to west of all the core columns. And then that resulted in the collapse of the perimeter columns, which led to the global collapse. So that's their theory. It's a progressive theory. In other words, one event, the expansion of the beams, led to another event, pushing off the girder, led to another event, the falling of the floor, led to another event, the cascade of floors, led to another event, the buckling of column 79, and then the buckling of adjacent columns, and then the buckling of all the perimeter columns. A progression of events.
Yeah, this would be funny if they weren't serious about it, because buildings aren't made of dominoes. It doesn't work that way. They're bolted together to stay up forever, and they have lots of safety factors. So they said no fuel fires added to this, so at least they got that right. They said no one died in the building. That's not true, and we'll hear some eyewitness testimony about that. They said there were no explosions. That's not true also. And we have many ear witnesses that will attest to that in the fire department and elsewhere, and video evidence as well. NIST did not actually predict the behavior of the building either, even though they had the most extensive building failure model ever made. So that's pretty sad. If you can't predict actual fact, what good is your model? Okay, not very good. Okay, now let's talk about the propaganda. And there's some conjecture here, but it's pretty interesting what you see in the media when stuff like this happens, especially when they talk about it before it happens. Okay, I don't know why the text was weird on that. It just didn't show up the same as it did on the computer. Jane Stanley, that's a picture of her, that's the BBC. They actually predicted the collapse of the Sullivan Brothers building, which is building 7, 20 minutes before it happened. And the funny thing is, if you look at that picture, let's see, I think this has got a laser. The person that made this video, not collapsed, that's the building. She just announced it had fallen. Yeah, that's pretty good. You can find that online too. And this is probably going to make some of you upset. It made me upset back when, because I was a Glenn Beck fan. But you might remember the 9/12 movement, which was everybody get together the day after 9/11 because it was remembering how we all came together and we mourned together. Well, I've got a soundbite that you'll hear in a minute. He was talking about the 9/11 families and saying that he hates them. And you can judge for yourself. Larry Silverstein was the leaseholder of the complex. And he collected $5 billion on the insurance. A few months before 9/11, he allegedly put a clause into his insurance policy for terrorism. And then when 2 planes hit, first they were going to pay him $3 billion, and he said, hey, hang on a second, there were 2 planes. So they came back and almost doubled the number. Yeah, I think his personal investment was roughly $19 million. And then he got some more investors and they came up with 90 million and then they came up with a loan. That's better than Bitcoin. And we'll play what he said.
In Washington, there is a large fire at the Pentagon. The Pentagon has been evacuated. And as you can see, perhaps the second tower, the front tower, the tower was collapsing.
Because everybody, once you've seen building 7, there's no way back. You can cheat on yourself and you can try to suppress it, but you cannot. You have seen it and then there's no way back. It's not very healthy, to lie to yourself. I say, no, I didn't see that. Yeah. But many people do because it's simply too painful.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago, I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. It seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. As you can see behind the Trade Center is still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash. And we know that behind that, there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline, a symbol of the financial prosperity of this city, but completely disappeared now, and New York is still unable to take on board what has happened to them today.
Presumably there were very few people in the Salomon building when it collapsed. I mean, there were, I suppose, fears of possible further collapses around the area.
World Trade Center 7 had always been considered the starting point for rebuilding.
I remember the call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they're going to be able to contain the fire. So, we've had such terrible loss of life. The smartest thing to do is pull it. Made that decision to pull. Then we watched the building.
It took me about a year to start hating the 9/11 victims' families. It took me about a year. And I had such compassion for them, and I really, I wanted to help them, and I was behind, let's give them money, let's get started, all of this stuff. But when I see, 9/11 victim family, on television or whatever, I'm just like, oh, shut up. I'm so sick of them because they're always complaining, and we did our best for them.
Yeah, I don't follow Glenn Beck anymore. On Fox, on the day of 9/11, they found a Fox freelancer, Mark Walsh, who nobody knows, who claims to know exactly why the towers fell that day. He got a close friend in a suit next to him who says, "I can't say what my business is." Interesting. I'll let you draw your own conclusions of what that guy's doing. He says, "I was watching with my roommate. It was approximately several minutes after the first plane had hit. I saw this plane come out of nowhere and just ream right into the side of the Twin Towers, exploding through to the other side. And then I witnessed both towers collapse, one first and then the second, mostly due to structural failure because the fire was just too intense." And when you hear him say it, it's so rehearsed. I don't know how he could have known that on the day of. I call that predictive programming. And you're going to see some more evidences of that. And I think that's what BBC was as well. When they, and especially when they do it on purpose, we've got some more examples of that. Okay, if you really want to know what the official story is for 9/11, watch the History Channel. They've got a bunch of new programs. And this 20th anniversary, they're really hamming it up. So today they're releasing a bunch of new stuff and they'll be playing it all night and into tomorrow. And I guarantee you they're not going to talk about controlled demolition unless they're making fun of it. So here's their official story. On September 11, 2001, 19 militants associated with the Islamic extremist group Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 airplanes and carried out suicide attacks against targets in the United States. 2 of the planes were flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. A 3rd plane hit the Pentagon just outside Washington, D.C., and the 4th plane crashed in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Almost 3,000 people were killed during the 9/11 terrorist attacks, which triggered major U.S. initiatives to combat terrorism and define the presidency of George W. Bush. That's all you're supposed to know. And the Patriot Act and the National Defense Act and all kinds of goodies. Okay, so we're going to see a couple of examples, and I've got to fly through this stuff, but if you haven't seen these before, they might be a little bit shocking. More predictive programming possibly, and you can draw your own conclusions. I'll just briefly explain them. The Lone Gunman, anybody heard of that show? Is a spin-off of the X-Files, so had a lot of attention. The pilot episode is about terrorists remote controlling, actually a secret government plot, remote controlling airliners into the World Trade Center. That came out in March of 2001. Interesting note on the movie The Matrix, came out in the 90s, I believe, 95 or, 99, so just before 01. Neo's passport expires 9/11/2001 in the movie. It's weird. In The Simpsons, I'll have to show you that one. And then this is very shocking to me when I saw it. Back to the Future has a lot of interesting coincidences. Okay, and maybe I'll forego these videos for now, some of them, just because they take a long time. But in The Lone Gunman here, they're on the airplane to bring us down in the middle of New York City. It shows them, they're flying right into the towers, and in the nick of time, they are able to grab control through their geeks of the airplane and dodge the building. In fact, they wind up hitting the antenna.
What do you mean, no, Bob?
It's crazy. Back to the Future, you remember the Twin Pines Mall? And it became the Lone Pine Mall. We got the Twin Towers, we got the One World Trade. There was a scene where the Twin Towers were on a movie screen in the McFly's home in the future, and it flickers and it shows them dropping, and it's got the Statue of Liberty, a lamp of the Statue of Liberty right there. There's some really interesting stuff in there. One of them is this. Here's a little picture on the left. You can see there's a giant 11 made by the tire tracks, and there's this interesting 9 over here. Marty's running through a giant flaming 9/11. Think what you will, but coincidence, who knows? There's the passport, Mr. Anderson, what is your passport expiration date? There it is. September 11, 2001. Interesting. Simpsons, Bart, is that a Twin Towers or an 11? Kind of weird that they chose $9. I don't know, coincidence, maybe? Okay, let's talk about some realities. We'll get into eyewitness accounts, photographic evidence, how buildings really collapse, and physical evidence. So it turns out that there are a lot of witnesses from emergency responders of explosions. They documented, the New York Fire Department documented 503. And of those, and they were just allowed to give they weren't goaded into saying anything or questioned about explosions. They volunteered, 118 of them volunteered stories about explosions. So I'll share some of those with you. And one of them in particular, there's a few in this video, so you can see some evidence.
What happened? An explosion. in the lobby, and then the third explosion, the whole lobby collapsed on us. What was it like? What was it like? Horrible. Horrible. The whole building just collapsed on us inside the lobby. Is that a secondary explosion? Yes, it was. That was the planet, brother. Yeah, definitely a secondary explosion. We was inside waiting to go upstairs, and on the way upstairs, the whole thing blew. And you just collapsed and everybody inside the lobby. Similar to the first tower coming down, secondary. I don't know about the first one, but I know the second one, it was terrible. Then there was a third one too after that one. That's it. Everybody was inside the building, waiting to go upstairs, and they just let loose. Everything just let loose inside the building. So what you told me is that there was a plane or whatever hit the building, and the secondary explosion. It was like 3 explosions after that. We came in after the fire. We came when the fire was going on already. We was in the staging area inside the building, waiting to go upstairs. And they exploded. The whole lobby collapsed on the lobby inside. After that, just man, everybody tried to make their way out. A lot of people trapped inside. I was sitting in the front of the Navy yard. Watching the first explosion. As we watched the building, so the black, that's a very large airplane flying right into the second building. Front of our eyes. Just like those big three. So surreal, like a movie set. People don't understand. There may be more. Any one of these buildings can blow up. This ain't done yet. That could be no worse than this. Nothing no more than this. We're in the building trying to help people, and it's exploding on your side. I don't think we get any worse than this.
At 8:30, he says he was headed to level B4 in Tower 1, 4 stories below ground.
I go downstairs, the foreman tells me to go to remove the containers. As I'm walking by the main freight car of the building, in the corridor, the impact of the explosion, of whatever happened, it threw me to the floor, and that's when everything started happening. It knocked me right to the floor. You didn't know what it was. Of course, you're assuming something just fell over in the loading dock, something very heavy, something very big. You don't know what happened, and all of a sudden you just felt the floor moving, and you get up, and the walls. And then, you know what I mean, now I'm hearing that the main freight car, the elevators, you know what I mean, fell down. So I was right near the main freight car, so I assumed what that was. Then, you know what I mean, you heard that coming towards you. I was racing, I was going towards the bathroom. All of a sudden, I opened the door, I didn't know it was a bathroom, and all of a sudden a big impact happened again. And all the ceiling tile was falling down, the light fixtures were falling, swinging out of the ceiling. And I come running out the door, and everything, the walls were down. And now I started running towards the parking lots. As I ran into the parking lots, you know what I mean, everybody screaming. I actually helped somebody get to a staircase that had a broken leg. There was a lot of smoke down there. There was a lot of people screaming. People came with us running up the ramps. We wanted to get help for the people that couldn't move down there. And as we were running up the ramps, and, you know, it's not like a regular mall that you're going straight up. You have to go, you know, you got to go clear across the whole from 1 to 2 World Trade Center. You know what I mean? That's the way you got to run. And then all of a sudden it happened all over again. Building 2 got hit. And then I don't know that. I just know something else hit us to the floor. Right in the basement, you felt it. Walls were caving in. Everything that was going on. I mean, I know people that got killed in the basement. I know people that got broken legs in the basement. People got reconstructive surgery because the walls hit them in the face. And I know I love seeing everybody every day that survived it and was there. And I just hear everybody's story. And it was terrible. No matter where you were in that building, there was no safe place to be except to get out, help as many people as you can, and just try to get out, because there was devastation everywhere.
We're going to bring more of those to you now. Barry Jennings, you're on the 8th floor. You work for the City Housing Department. Explain to me the moment of impact.
Me and Mr. Hess, the corporation counsel, were on the 23rd floor. I told him we got to get out of here. We started walking down the stairs and into the 8th floor. This is a big explosion. We were back up to the 8th floor.
And I told the head chef, I said, this is it. We're dead. We're not going to make it out of here. I took a fire extinguisher and I busted the window out. This gentleman here heard my cries for help. This gentleman right here. And he said, kept saying, stand by, somebody's coming to get you. They couldn't get to us 1 hour because they couldn't find us. You thought that was it? I thought it was dead. I thought that was it. I prayed to Allah, but that's it. We're gone.
My son Bobby was killed in the World Trade Center by an explosion that went off before the towers fell.
I think a bomb went off in the lobby first, then a plane hit the building.
The bomb hit the lobby first, and a couple of seconds in the first plane hit.
Devices that were planted in the building.
Explosives that were in the building.
Huge explosion now waiting to lay on all of us.
Help me get justice for Bobby and the thousands of others who died that day.
The entire top of the building just blew up.
The demolition team set off. When you see the old demolition, these old buildings.
By explosive debris. Okay. Eyewitnesses to the lobby being blown out by bombs in Building 7. That's Barry Jennings, the black man toward the end. He was in it. He was actually in charge of security and safety. And he got a call when he was up in the building saying, "Get out now." And then they blew the stairwell. And this was before, this wasn't from debris from the towers collapsing because they hadn't collapsed yet. And he was really clear in his testimony about that. So in the movie Loose Change, if you've heard of that, that's where that testimony comes from. Anyway, when he was being pulled out of the buildings by the fire department, he was walking over dead bodies in the lobby. So when NIST says there were no deaths in the building, it's just a lie. And Barry Jennings' testimony was everywhere. Everybody knew about it. Let's see here. Is it, maybe this thing's dying? Or it's going to catch up? Okay, you good? All right. Okay, some of the 118 of the witnesses from the New York Fire Department. Here are some examples. You can just kind of read through those. You had 3 loud explosions. A lot of people said that. Bombs going off. Lower floor giving out. Boom, 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 boom. Somebody said firecrackers is what it sounded like. Explosions coming from halfway up the building. This is before it started falling. A lot of explosions, a slow shake in the ground, bombs going off, 7 or 8 of them. So also, I don't know if you've heard stories of people being told not to come to work that day. I've heard several of those stories over the past 20 years. Turns out there's an article in Haaretz. Odigo was one of the texting services, an Israeli texting service, and they actually blew the whistle on themselves. And so there's that article there saying they received, that people, at least 2 people received text messages just before the towers got hit, notifying them not to be there. You may have heard of the dancing Israelis, very interesting story. You can look it up. It's still easily found because it's so prevalent online, but there were, I thought there were 5, but there's 6 in the photograph here. I don't have to double check that, but I thought there were 5 that were apprehended celebrating in New Jersey across the Hudson, watching the towers burn. And then there was a photograph that they developed a bunch of photographs in their cameras. They had been celebrating and filming and high-fiving each other when the towers were burning. And some nearby residents blew the whistle on that, and they were apprehended. And they kept them for, I think, 150 days. Turned out they were Mossad agents. And one of them, Sivan Kurzberg, you can see this picture here. They took a space out, I don't know why, but when they had to get a Freedom of Information Act request in to get these pictures from the FBI. But he's holding up a lighter and pretending to burn the towers, and look at the date, September 10th. So to say they didn't have foreknowledge is pretty ridiculous. And there was a documentary in Israel after this, and they all appeared on it, and one of them said, "We were there to document the event. He says, the fact of the matter is we are coming from a country that experiences terror daily. Our purpose was to document the event. Sounds like foreknowledge to me. Okay, another piece of evidence that you'll see in videos is these puffs of dust, more than a puff. That's pretty large ejection of material. Best explanation I have for it is that they're pre-detonation squibs for the controlled demolition. Okay, I think we have a duplicate of this. Sorry to tell you that. Yeah, we already looked at the botched demolitions, but those are fun to see. Okay. Now, this is the gentleman, the physics professor, 35 years teaching high school physics, and he schooled this, this group at NIST, $16 million study. He just used a simple tool, video tool, where he could examine the videos and take measurements over time, because you know, between frames, how much time is going on. And he just took some measurements and he measured the acceleration, and he noticed that for a significant distance, about 100 feet, it was in free fall. And that's a big deal. It means there's no resistance to the descent whatsoever. That's the number one thing I want you to take home. If you're talking to your friends, nobody, and I've been debating this for 20, well, not 20 years, since 08, 07, 08. And nobody will take you on free fall, straight down through the path of greatest resistance into its own footprint. That just cannot happen without controlled demolition, because you have to remove over a large distance, you have to remove all of the supports. And we're talking about dozens and dozens of structural steel elements, massive girders going straight up, tied in. They're made to stay there. And they also have fireproofing on them, but even if the fireproofing comes off, the building will not fall straight down at free fall, cannot do it. There's nobody on this earth that can argue with you with that evidence. Nobody. So here's an aerial view of the demolition after it happened. I'll just call it a demolition, that's what it is. You can see it's pretty tidy, that's building 7. 1 and 2 are huge buildings. So considering the amount of mass that's there, they're pretty tidy as well. I believe building 6 was demolished from the inside out. I don't know that much about it, but there's some reports about it online. Okay, another piece of very important evidence that you should bring up if you're debating this with your friends is the photographs of molten steel and very, very hot steel in the cleanup. So you have testimony from firefighters that there was molten steel running down the channel rails, and they described it as lava. And you can see in this picture, when steel glows, it glows, you can tell the temperature just from the hue. So you're looking there at, approximately 2,000 degrees with that glowing red steel. And in an office fire, or even in a kerosene fire, you wouldn't expect these buildings, especially burning rich the way they were, with a bunch of black smoke billowing out of the buildings. You wouldn't expect the fire to be more than 600 Fahrenheit. And that's actually what the thermal model at NIST said for building 7. They were saying no more than 300 C at the hottest point. And you can see down here, molten steel is flowing out of the side of the building. And they said there was no evidence for that. That's pretty sad. Even in the FEMA documentation, there was evidence for molten steel. They ignored it. And samples actually were sent to Jeff Fair, who was a friend of mine. He was a BYU professor helping Dr. Jones with his research. He was an electron microscopy lab manager, and he has steel samples with sulfidation happening at the microcrystalline level, and he says that had to happen at very high temperatures. So, now this is interesting. Fire Engineering Magazine has been around for a while, and they pride themselves on techniques for how to protect buildings in architectural designs from fire. And they talk about how to get people out safely, et cetera, et cetera. So Bill Manning was incensed about this, the cleanup at Ground Zero. He said, for more than 3 months, structural steel from the World Trade Center has been and continues to be cut up and sold for scrap. Crucial evidence that could answer many questions about high-rise building design practices and performance under fire condition is on the slow boat to China, perhaps never to be seen again in America until you buy your next car. Fire engineering has good reason to believe that the official investigation blessed by FEMA and run by the American Society of Civil Engineers is a half-baked farce that may already have been commandeered by political forces whose primary interest, to put it mildly, lie far afield of full disclosure. That's pretty damning. Okay, there we go. So back to Stephen Jones. Here's some pictures from his peer-reviewed paper that the international team of, I think, 9 researchers and more, a lot of people helped them. They found in 4 independent samples of the dust. So this is the last smoking gun you can share with your friends. They actually have a chain of custody on all these samples, a story that goes with it, people that happen to collect it for memorabilia's sake. And then when they heard about Dr. Jones, they sent it in saying, hey, maybe you can learn something from this. And they found these red-gray chips, and then they examined them with all the latest techniques. I mean, they even put them in a bomb calorimeter. That's X-ray energy dispersive spectroscopy here that tells you what's in it. And these are the chips. They're very small, so that's 1 millimeter. This is 1/10 of a millimeter, but it's in the dust. They also found iron microspheres, which happen when you have molten iron and you're exploding it, and you've got droplet formation in the air as it's cooling. That's how you get spherical shaped balls of iron throughout the dust. It was all over the place in the 9/11 dust. So they found out that they had, from all the different samples, they had the same stuff. And this is actually showing in a differential scanning calorimeter, at this temperature, you get an energetic release of energy from the stuff burning. And then this is a chart showing over here, the chips that Dr. Jones found versus some popular explosives over here. The blue is energy per unit mass. And so you've got something on the order of TNT that was in that dust. Still unburned, so they were actually able to verify that it produced molten iron when they burned it. It's a slam dunk. So here's the peer-reviewed paper that the group submitted. They have other papers as well. But that's a picture of the iron microspheres that are all over. That's in the Open Chemical Physics Journal. It's easy to look up if you look up the Dr. Jones, Stephen Jones, and the peer-reviewed paper. University of Alaska Fairbanks undertook to do a more exhaustive analysis than NIST, which was the most intense analysis of a building falling up to that point. University of Fairbanks, Alaska Fairbanks, went above and beyond. They were funded by Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, which makes me proud because I'm a contributor. And their finite element model debunks the NIST conclusions in many different ways. So contrary to the conclusions of NIST, the University of Alaska Fairbanks research team found that the collapse of World Trade Center 7 on 9/11 was caused not by fires, but by the near simultaneous failure of every column in the building. Yeah, exactly. Definitely nothing random about that. Now, 9/11 families have submitted this report. This happened just last year or a year and a half ago, and they are waiting for NIST to correct their paper. So all types of connections were modeled in this analysis. I went through it in detail, and I've done thousands of hours of finite element modeling, and it seems very sound to me. Very impressive, actually. They modeled the connections in detail, and then they did what they call dynamic substructuring, which is where you take the behavior of these connections, and then you model them as springs, and you put them into the global model. And it's very accurate, actually. And it's the best way to do those kinds of large models where you have millions of connections in the building. Several fatal flaws were found in the NIST model. One was that the walls were modeled as fixed. That's not true. They're not fixed. That exaggerates the movement of the truss that they said would have fallen. And when modeled correctly, the movement was about 1/6 of what NIST said it was. NIST said 6 inches. The correct model says about 1 inch. And NIST also said that the column was just sitting there free floating and that it wasn't bolted on. It was bolted on. So it's pretty disingenuous. And you can see that all of the steps that University of Fairbanks went through, and here are some steps that NIST went through when it comes to modeling. They just left a lot of stuff out. For $16 million, I would think they could do better. Okay, let's see, this is supposed to go, here we go. I'm just gonna briefly talk about the Pentagon because it's a thing, it's happened, and there's not a lot of information about it out there. And the video that they released, the video, 2 frames of this cloud-looking thing and an explosion, doesn't tell you much. So there are 40 some odd videos that they confiscated from local businesses and also, of course, all the cameras. I'm sure they have a few cameras in the Pentagon. They have not released those. Those are classified. And I think I know why. So a documentary by Citizen Investigation Team about 8 years later examined the Pentagon disaster, and they interviewed the same witnesses that the FBI talked to. So none saw the plane hit the building, interestingly, none of them. And these were people up close. They were ducking for cover. They saw the plane come in low and hot, then they saw an explosion afterward. That was it. They were running for their lives. All independently testified to seeing a different trajectory than the official trajectory, and the trajectory that they corroborated between each other was the same, very, very close. And it could not have put the plane in the hole that the Pentagon claims was caused by an airplane. And then you can see this picture. So these are the different routes. This is the path that it actually took. This was the path they said it took. And these were people that had a good frame of reference. They were standing just below it on either side. They could say exactly where it was coming from. This hole is supposedly the nose cone of the airplane penetrating the innermost ring of the Pentagon. I'm sorry, but it's funny. It's ridiculous. An aluminum hollow aircraft, I don't care how fast it's going, it's not going to get through the Pentagon. No way. There's layers of thick concrete and rebar. It's just not going to do it. So that's pretty funny. I mean, I don't know what made that hole, but it was probably designed to make holes like that. There was a cab driver whose story was, he was supposed to have been hit by some light poles that the plane knocked down along this trajectory here. Well, they went and interviewed the guy, and his story didn't match up, needless to say. And in fact, they got him off camera, and I've got a little video clip of that I want to show you, but he's admitting to some things. So everybody always asks, after all this time and all those people, couldn't there have been somebody that talked? Well, he talked. So I'll share that with you. It's hard to find. Let's see here. Oh, here's our friend Lloyd England, the taxi cab driver. There's a picture of his taxi, his Lincoln Town car. Supposedly the pole went in there. There's no scratches on the hood. And he pulled it out, and somebody helped him do it, supposedly. And these poles are bent in a perfect arc. And this plane was supposedly going 500 miles an hour, knocked him down and made this perfect arc with it. Yeah, sure it did. Anyway, let's see here. I want to show you Lloyd. Here you go. Tell us what you think, Lloyd.
Much more candid when.
Oh, is it going to play? Oh, I passed it up. Hang on.
Much more candid when he didn't realize he was being recorded.
Oh, quiet.
You know what his story is? That's what I said. You got to understand what you're saying. Not the truth. It's his story. It's nothing to do with the truth. It's his story. It's a big thing. It's a world thing happening. I'm a small man. You know, right? My lifestyle is completely different from this. Right. I'm not supposed to be involved in this. This is for other people. People who have money and all this kind of stuff.
You said, what do you mean?
I'm not bullshit about this. I don't have this.
So you point that these people that have all the money, this is their event.
This is true.
Meaning they're doing it for their own reasons,
That's
right?
right. I'm not supposed to be in it.
But they used you, right?
I'm in it.
You're in it.
Yeah, we came across the highway together.
You and their event.
That's right.
But they must have planned that.
One thing about it, you gotta understand something. When people do things and get away with it, you eventually it's gonna come to me. And when it comes to me, it's gonna be so big I can't do nothing about it. And when it comes to me, it's gonna be so big I can't do nothing about it. So it has to be stopped in the beginning with a small to see keep it from spreading.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Lloyd, in essence, admitted his involvement in the 9/11
so
black
there's an admission
operation,
for you,
but he was
basically.
cautious not to outright confess.
But I can't interpret what he said
He
any
worked
other
hard to
way.
distance himself from the planners, while
Yeah.
admitting it was
Put
planned.
together with the fact that his story doesn't make any sense. He couldn't even tell the same story over again. Anyway, we talked about the SEC investigation. The wording on it's kind of funny, but I'm almost out of time, and I want to play at least some of what I think is the best video to share with your friends. It's 15 minutes long, so it's not too long. And well, first I'll go through a little summary quick, but I want to play this video. It's edited by, or it's narrated by Ed Asner, and it's architects and engineers produced it. It's about Building 7, and it's a collection of engineers commenting, and it's really something else. I've seen people that were vehemently against talking to me about this stuff. They finally give the video a chance, and they come out scratching their heads. So that's pretty good. So to summarize, we had news for impossible information relayed before the events. We had eyewitnesses to explosions, insufficient and false evidence for NIST claims, willful destruction of evidence, photographic evidence of controlled demolitions, including free fall, samples of demolished structures that contain nanothermite and iron microspheres. We have FEA models that accurately show a replication of observed building collapse, and we have admissions of guilt. Just briefly, how many in the US actually know the truth about this? Well, it turns out it's catching on. This was in 2014, and there were 74%, at least with Building 7, doubt the official story, either don't know or think it's controlled demolition. Almost half think it's controlled demolition. That's 2014. I bet now it's over 50%. And then doubt the official story overall, significant, 48%. So making headway. Okay, I think I just passed up. That's funny. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, go ahead, and if you can play that, Brian, and then we'll get through part of it, and then turn the time over to Micah to talk about the why. Yeah, go ahead and play that.
Throughout the ages, architects and engineers have designed and built the great structures that have made our world and withstood the test of time. Hi, I'm Ed Asner. Welcome to Architects and Engineers. Let's look. Now at modern steel frame buildings. This is the Empire State Building, a marvel of modern architecture. It was built to last. Architects and engineers of today use computers to design and engineer buildings that will endure the forces of nature, such as earthquakes, fires, and hurricanes. This modern skyscraper was also built to last. We've seen buildings completely destroyed like this before, but only when done intentionally. Danny Jowenko is the expert on this in Europe. What did he say?
Dit is controlled demolition. Zeker weten, zeker weten. Er is nagesprongen. is in opdracht gebeurd. Het heeft een team gedaan van experts.
Let's compare. Explosives are used to demolish buildings like this in just seconds. Okay, so it's a controlled demolition. What's the problem with that? Well, it happened on the afternoon of 9/11 at the World Trade Center. Let's just think about this. Controlled demolitions cannot be engineered and rigged in a day. It takes months. And therefore, this event must have been planned in advance.
Keep your eye on that building as they coming down. Watch it blow up. Moving back. We are walking back.
Did they actually use the word brought down, and who was it that was telling you this?
The fire department, and they did use the word, we're gonna have to bring it down.
And these people heard explosions.
We heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. It looked like there was a shockwave ripping through the building, and the windows all busted out. About a second later, the bottom floor caved out. The building followed after that.
Takes his hand off, and you had 3, 2, 1, and it was boom, 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 boom.
And these reporters recognized it as a controlled demolition.
And I turned in time to see what looked like a skyscraper implosion. Looked like it had been done by a demolition crew. The whole thing just collapsing down on itself.
For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
It was almost as if it were a planned implosion. It just pancaked.
So what's the problem if this was a planned demolition? Well, we are told by government agencies that this building came down as a result of normal office fires. The National Institute of Standards and Technology produced their final report in 2008.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires fueled by office furnishings. It did not collapse from explosives or from fuel oil fires.
But what do you think brought down the building?
And what caught my eye is more than 1,300 architects and engineers examined the evidence about Building 7's collapse and disagree with the official report issued by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I certainly am much more open-minded about it than I was, and it is because of the involvement of the 9/11 families and all these engineers and architects.
You are about to hear from architect of 23 years, Richard Gage, AIA, member of the American Institute of Architects and founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Now there are more than 1,500 architects and engineers who say that it could not have been brought down by office fires. They are backed by 9/11 family members who are calling for an independent, unbiased investigation.
I'm Richard Gage. Fires have never before caused the collapse of any skyscraper, even though there are numerous examples of much hotter, larger, and longer-lasting fires in these buildings. And in the case of Building 7, the fire that NIST said started the collapse had actually burned out over an hour before. It could not have caused the collapse, as NIST claims. Yet this 47-story modern steel-frame skyscraper, which was not hit by an airplane, collapses mostly into its own footprint like a house of cards, as fast as a bowling ball falling off the side of the building, in just under 7 seconds. Listen to the experts.
Building number 7 descended in free fall for the first 100 feet, which means that there was absolutely no resistance to the descent whatsoever.
NIST has admitted it went into free fall for 8 stories. And going from motionless to free fall instantly, that's a bothersome part of the puzzle because NIST never explained it.
We've got a building that came down in its own footprint, so all of the columns really needed to be severed at the same time in order for that structure to fall the way that we saw.
The symmetry is the smoking gun.
The whole building completely comes down in one continuous motion. There couldn't have been any structural resistance.
According to NIST, the failure occurred at column 79 on level 12. They're talking about a single columnar collapse or failure that resulted in a total collapse of the building.
It is possible that you could have a local failure as a result of a connection failing. But the likelihood of that failure dragging the entire building in such a fashion that all the columns would fail at the same time is an impossibility.
Impossibility?
Yes.
What I saw, it was a classic implosion. The center of the core, the penthouse area starts to move first, and then the building follows along with it.
I'd like to know why NIST excluded the document from FEMA in Appendix C that documented the evidence of melting steel. Why is
this
this
video on YouTube? And we're gonna talk about the why behind it. But basically, they're just corroborating what we already talked about. Absolutely, ironclad evidence is out there. Definitely talk to your friends. Don't be afraid to mention these things. And now we get to talk about why this happened and what it means to us. So take it away, Micah.
All right. It's for the internet people. Right. Oh. Maybe one day I'll get my wire on, right? All right. Anyway, hey, I'm Micah Turner. I don't know if any of you know me too much. Maybe a few of you do. But yeah, I've been a member of Defending Utah for a while. And but this presentation of the why, this part of the why 9/11, what I really like to do when I tell people things is I really want to bring it home. So there's a lot of whys, a lot of reasons, a lot of things I did with 9/11. You know, is went overseas, started dropping love bombs on everyone, just wanton murder, excuses to make new technology. And that's really where we're kind of going with this. So throughout history, the conspiracy has been around for a long time, perhaps since Cain murdered Abel. But they have kind of things they do, patterns, ways they go. And I just kind of want to help you recognize it a little bit, kind of some simpler, larger ones. So in the 1860s, we had the War of Northern Aggression. Some call that the Civil War. I think that is less accurate. And this was done to erode states' rights, basically destroy the 10th Amendment on a logistical level. In the 1910s, there was World War I. The purpose of this was to create the League of Nations, the foundation of the first world government. So they've been close a few times, like with the hegemony in ancient Rome. You know, they've done some things like there, but this was probably the biggest up to that point. However, Americans were like, nah, this is bad. So they went ahead and just did another world war. And out of that, since the League of Nations dissolved, they got the United Nations as their new foundation for world government. After that, we had a great time in the Cold War. You know, they got to create all kinds of staged rationales. We got to build more technology. We got to have more military state, et cetera, et cetera. This principally, for what we see a lot of and is being manifest right now, this is when the CIA made Al-Qaeda. This is a known fact. This isn't even questionable. So, and allow them to get into the Middle East. In 1971, this is a really big one that basically nobody knows about, was the establishment of the petrodollar. The first country to sign on for the petrodollar was Saudi Arabia. what is the petrodollar? It is an agreement. So Saudi Arabia agreed to this thing that Kissinger proposed to them. He said, if you agree to buy and sell oil in strictly American dollars, or have that pegged to the value of American dollars, we will provide you military protection. This is the contract, and it's called the petrodollar or petrocurrency. So this is kind of the rationale of like Kuwait, Operation Desert Shield, that kind of stuff. And then in 1973 is when, if I remember correctly, it's when OPEC was created, which was a body of nations in the area signed on to the petrodollar. And simultaneously at 1971, to show you how important this is when Nixon did an executive order to stop the convertibility of dollars to gold. He did it as what he said was a temporary measure to protect the dollar from the speculators. That's what he said. And of course, this was a radical new monetary system and order, and also a very radical and somewhat new, they've been in it for a while, resource control. We could talk about that a heck of a lot, but we're not gonna. So in 2001, you have the events of 9/11. This is what we'll be talking about. This is what launched their psychographic program. And this is the stuff that's getting you right now, you might not even know about. And then in 2020, we have the fake pandemic seems like in perpetuity, because I guess now their false religious dogma of evolution does its thing every weekend, as opposed to every couple million years or something. But this creates the biosecurity state, which will be merging with the psychographics program. At least that's my opinion. So just a quick little refresher, which you probably don't need. The conspiracy story about this whole thing is Magic Land office fires destroyed 3 buildings in New York and murdered a bunch of people in broad daylight on national television. The Patriot Act was passed as the new pinnacle of national security. Then, after chasing Osama bin Laden around the globe, Obama announced, "We got him." But they didn't tell anyone about it until after they dumped all the evidence, his body, in the sea. Then the team that allegedly got Osama bin Laden all died a year later, except for 2 guys that wrote books reinforcing national narratives. And despite killing the former CIA asset, Osama bin Laden, this is also not controversial, the NSA still builds another surveillance machine in Bluffdale, Utah. And they did all this on the back of the rationale of national security. So this is what the conspiracy wants you to believe. But the real story here, where we're going with this, is 9/11, is what the Bluffdale data center means and why it exists. It's not the only one, by the way, but it is one that does what it does. So the real story. We are now entering what many consider an age of the new industrial revolution, a 4th industrial revolution. The previous revolutions had to do with fast transportation, heavy machinery, and ability to produce and consume huge quantities of energy and create goods and wealth on a scale never before seen. In this 4th industrial revolution, instead of rail lines and cars, there are internet lines and a central node in that system to direct the traffic. And in this new industrial revolution, the commodity of greatest desire is carried on these new lines, and it is information, specifically information on the individual and the means to understand and process that information. The principal purpose for this transformative event of 9/11 is to implement psychographics across the United States and the world. The conspiracy wants to make that psychographics profile of every individual on the planet. Data is the new oil. They must lay the infrastructure for this 4th industrial revolution. So what is psychographics? So I'm going to try and describe it to you here, and I think you'll get it. So we'll start off with demographics. What is demographics? Everyone has heard that word. So demographics is about putting groups of people and trying to describe groups of people together. So like, for example, the demographic of this room, how many men and how many women are in here? You know, you could look at a neighborhood and you go, what's the median income of this neighborhood or this city? What is in this area? What is the main type of job? That is it an industrial type job? Is it service? Is it food? Is it consulting? You know, in this district, you know, how many white people are here? How many not white people are here? You know, whatever. It's just it's trying to aggregate people into groups, and you might even put like Pepsi and Cola with that. So, but psychographics is all about the individual. So they want to understand the individual's political leanings. They want to understand how you consume your media and what media you are consuming. They want to know your lifestyle. How do you live your life generally? They want to know if you're homosexual or not. They want to know what your job is. They want to know where you live. They want to know who your family members are. And they want to know who your friends are, who you hang out with. So generally what they want is they want to know how you think, and they want to know how you interpret the world. So some examples. So doing this on the individual, it really gives them the ability to predict how you will act and react, and also gives them data that they might use in order to try to influence and shape you as they desire. So let's look at some more benign examples of psychographics that you're experiencing right now. So, for example, this is a screenshot of my web browser. I just went and I type in stuff. So if we look at the advertisements on the right, it goes stuff on Amazon, shop automotive. The browser, my psychographic profile, it knows that I have an Amazon account, or at least I shop on Amazon. And then they also know that I buy lots of automotive stuff on Amazon. Maybe they know I own an automotive business. I don't know, maybe. I don't know exactly how much data they have. It's kind of the way they do things. They keep it secretive. But they know enough about me to go, hey, this guy, this psychographic profile says this might get us a click. Another same kind of thing. I just type in cool things. These are all first tries, by the way. I didn't keep doing this to try to get something. Here on the right, they go, the advertisement is KiwiCo. Official study. So this is a company that sells little science kits for like kids and stuff to like try to get them interested in whatnot. I have a 2-year-old little boy who loves grabbing my big wrench that I give him when I'm working on cars so we go around and bang on stuff. You know, like they know that I am the market for this. I might buy this for my kid. So here's another thing. This is my YouTube account. Look at the top left, ad for Harbor Freight. They probably know I've walked in there because they collect location data on my phone. It could be also, it's just from browsing history as well. But they know that my psychographic profile says this is likely to get a click. Here's a little bit, same thing, my YouTube profile. So we have in the section, this is kind of where I'm going to start getting into how nefarious this is. So if we look at the top, it's like my interests are tools, automotive repair, electrical engineering, off-road vehicles, heavy equipment, 3D printing, blah, 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 blah. Now, if we look on the far right over there look at that, do you thumbnail? Because I'm subscribed to our channel. Of course I am. But if you hit that arrow, I don't know how this, whatever. If you hit that arrow in the top right where it expands all the topics that I might be interested in, let me tell you what's not going to be there. Nothing is going to be there that says liberty or freedom or government corruption. That doesn't exist. That's not a topic. They don't want that. That's part of them molding me. It's part of them trying to mold you when they do that to you. So, but you know, and I'm subscribed to a little more than defending Utah. You'd think it'd be up there. It's not though. I've checked. So I'd like to give you a little example of a little bit more nefariousness. So that you've probably experienced as well, but perhaps you didn't realize it. So for example, during the fake pandemic, if your psychographic profile suggested that you thought wearing masks was foolish and you wanted to learn more about why it was foolish by typing a question into your search bar, such as do face masks work? Okay. Then you are likely to receive a search engine result that gently pushes you in the direction the conspiracy wants. Something like this: how and why to respect the coronavirus. This article even starts off with saying COVID-19 hardly seems like something that deserves our respect. And then of course it goes on to say that just do everything you're told. You know, let's rationalize it however they think they can sell it to you. So the psychographic program that's being implemented, it's not just analyzing you, it's analyzing all the data on these web pages and pulling out stuff and saying it's tailored for this kind of individual. It's automated. I'm sure that they can go in if they want. So let's say you're somebody that already believes that these things work on your face and you just want to get something to shove into your acquaintance's face or some guy on Facebook or something. They're probably going to give you this: do face masks work? Here are 49 scientific studies that explain why they do. It's perfect, you know, it's got all the buzzwords in it. It's got masks, it's got works, it's got science, it's got studies. And then, you know, probably whoever sees this isn't even going to read it. I mean, even people that are on the better side don't read a lot of things, but people that are on the worse side really don't read anything, it seems to me. Anyway, this is designed to make you more radical. You already agree with the conspiracy's agenda, so they're going to give you stuff to reinforce that. Now, this is automated. This is all automated. There's no humans involved other than probably writing the article. But perhaps you can imagine what targeted atrocities this technology has the potential to enable. We're going to talk more on that later. So, implementing psychographics. You've seen a little bit of it, but, well, we got to talk some more about it because there's more to talk about. So the conspiracy doesn't even want you to know about psychographics, let alone the intricacies and the frightening true potential of it. And any that do hear of this thing of psychographics, they want them to believe it at least had a catalyzing event to necessitate its invention. And practice is like 9/11. But as usual, there was no public catalyzing event for its beginning, for the conspiracy never creates a program spot on after the event. They always are planned and methodical and get everything in advance, get all their ducks in a row. Nearly a decade before the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the government has been using a secret program to monitor billions of Americans' calls. It surveilled phone calls made by US citizens to as many as 116 foreign countries. According to a USA Today investigation, the program dated back to the George H.W. Bush administration. This is published by USA Today in 2015. So the initial practice that they did this on was enabled by FISA, which is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978. This was the practical beginning of understanding how to collect data on the average American. Since under their illegal reasoning, if you talk to someone who wasn't an American, the so-called government, more like a criminal syndicate, no longer needs a warrant to spy on you. So why should you hate FISA so much? I just give you a little specifics just to make sure we're all in the same boat. So it authorizes warrantless searches. So they just, basically it works like civil asset forfeiture where they charge the item. So that what they're doing is they're charging the idea of you making a phone call out of the United States. That's basically what it is. This, of course, is blatantly illegal in statutory law, Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution. Just says you can't, you got to have a warrant for every little thing. And on that warrant has a person and a place and a thing to be seized. So you can't just write a warrant like the drunk driver checkpoints. Those are illegal. You'd have to have a warrant for every single person that goes through there, according to statutory law, that is the Fourth Amendment. So, and really what this is going for is this is the beginning. It helps them understand how to sort the data. So when they did this in the 90s, though, as far as I can tell, there wasn't any like excellent text-to-speech program like there is today, nor any automated way to sort free data. If it was created, when it was created, standard computers had less capabilities than the phone in your pocket, and internet capabilities were of like 256K, like a quarter megabit, were considered very fast for home. And all the modern conveniences of data transmission and collecting and sorting simply did not exist. The NSA literally had just swaths of workers just listening to people's phone calls and then cataloging it, right? So they had people like this guy, you know, he looks kind of nice, but it's probably not because he's listening for the NSA, or so I assume. You know, we had this nice looking girl right here, so it's pretty good, and these ethnically diverse people. And this, of course, was all approved by the conspiracy. So, once the foundation for sorting the data, yeah, it's pretty dark humor. Once the foundation for sorting the data on every American has been accomplished, it was time to begin its automation. And right on schedule, the events of 9/11 happened. This is the perfect catalyzing event to get Americans to embrace the psychographic program. Of course, they don't know it consciously, but the idea of it, right? So before 9/11, you say the government, the crime syndicate, the conspiracy is listening to your phone calls and stuffs, and you're like, you're a nut job. You and your cat are a nut job. That's how bad it is, right? That's how stupid people are. They can't believe terrible truths. In 2002, you say the same thing, and the radical fool feigning patriotism says it's got to be done. We got to do it. We got to listen to your phone calls. Them big bearded multi-wide terrorists are out there from the Middle East to get you. I mean, look at this guy's fanny pack. Do you see that thing? That's some serious patriotism right there. So they're all like America, right? So that's what happened right after 9/11. We got to do it. We got to do it, right? And now here's where it gets crazy. Now this fact is so ubiquitous that many exclaim, I just want them to give me relevant advertisements, right? I just want them to present me the stuff I want. When I search for stuff, I want them to know I'm looking for automotive products on Amazon. That's what these people would say, right? And a lot of people say it. You might have heard it. But what this fool doesn't understand is what they're really saying is they're saying they want somebody else to have a psychographic profile on them. So now, psychographics. Congratulations for the conspiracy. Every person is not just being spied on, it's actually being depended on and viewed as a service. That's what it's become. So the average person goes to their YouTube and thinks, how wonderful is it that all kinds of videos they want to see, that's what shows up. You know, so I get to watch stuff about pouring Babbitt bearings, because I'm sure you all are interested in that. I love me a good Babbitt bearing, just can't help it. And your 40-year-old brony coworker gets to watch the latest My Little Pony. And when I'm on my Facebook, they go ahead and give me an advertisement right here about collecting data analytics on my website for my business. So Facebook absolutely knows I have a business. There's no way anyone else who doesn't have a business and has a website for it, it's very unlikely you're going to get that ad. Although their profile on me was a little wrong, because when I first looked at it, I had no idea what this was. I had to consult an expert, but I knew it was meant for me. That's the point. So now, of course, 9/11 was also used to justify jaunting around the Middle East and murdering swaths of people like Napoleon did before the conspiracy we have now. And of course, there's a lot of geopolitical benefits for the conspiracy with that, dropping love bombs on people. But in my opinion, the real prize of 9/11 is really the psychographic program. And it doesn't end with YouTube advertising. And towards the end of this presentation, I'm going to project this into the future a little bit. So, of course, most of us, if not all of us, have heard of the USA Patriot Act. We're just going to go over this a little bit because this is the legislative foundation for the psychographics, right? So it was passed 4 days after September 11, 2001. If you go to Wikipedia, they say 45 days. They're wrong. So this is what it stands for: uniting and strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism. Of course, they came up with the acronym before they made up these words, because that's how they roll. And of course, nothing was read about it. And here's something that a lot of people don't realize: it's actually redone every 2 years, because this is one thing they follow in the Constitution, probably so they can mess with the budget and make it bigger every 2 years. But the budget requires that all military expenditures and anything that has to do with defense cannot last more than 2 years. So every 2 years they do the National Defense Authorization Act. So every year it's in there. It's in there. They always tweak it, always make it a little bigger. Just got to do it. And now it's called the USA Freedom Act. That was actually introduced by Mike Lee in 2015. So if you think he's a good guy, he's not. So why should you hate the Patriot Act? You probably already know that. We'll just go over this briefly. It expands illegal warrantless wiretapping and monitoring of Americans. It creates secret search warrants. So before that was like public record, but now it's national security, so you can't ever see it. And then it allows warrants to be applied to objects. So in this case, what they will say is, we need a warrant to this internet line. Yet again, not a person, could be a place, and as a thing, it's not a person though. So it's not a warrant. They call it a warrant. It literally is not. By definition of statutory code, it is U.S. Constitution and the Fourth Amendment. It is not a warrant. It is something else. And it also demands that businesses go out of their way to give them their data. Of course, a lot of the way they structure this is it's all propaganda. So that, like you got what, the iPhones, Apple, they're like, oh no, we don't want to give our data away. And like the FBI is like, oh, we need to crack. And then they're like, we cracked it anyway. We didn't need your guys' help. And but there's always like this thing where they're pretending to struggle, that they don't want to give them their data. Of course not. And I'll show you. I'll give you some relevant examples why that's just a bunch of crap on like a logistical level. So, and it makes local police warrants more secretive. I guess if they just label it national security, it's a thing. And this whole thing just means that the Fourth Amendment doesn't exist anymore. So they're nullifying the Constitution without amending the Constitution, which your rights are natural anyway. They don't depend on the Constitution, but it's directly against statutory law. So now here's the thing about the Patriot Act and now the USA Freedom Act. If you want to read it, you can't. It's basically impossible to find. So, however, one of our members, Dr. Scott Bradley, who maybe you've seen before, somehow he got a hold of it some time ago. So I just called him up and I was like, give me the data. And he was like, it's in my book on page 196. Well, he didn't label the page specifically then, but anyway. So I'm just going to read these two so you can see kind of a little bit. No person shall disclose to any other person other than the persons necessary to produce tangible things of the section. That the Federal Bureau of Investigation has sought or obtained things under this section. Secret warrants. That's what that says. Upon application, the court shall enter an ex parte order authorizing the installation and use of a pen register or trap device anywhere within the United States. So that's a warrant for just collecting information from a node. Okay. Yeah, you want information? You use this trap device to collect it. We'll kind of show logistics of how it works, not the devices. I don't know about them really, but we know how they work. So here's a quick little timeline, and really the entire point of this slide is to show you this logo that they actually made. And yeah, the NSA, they made this logo. This is an office. Just if you just look at it a little harder, there's a pyramid with a freaking ray of looking at the planet on it. It's so ridiculous. It's just, so in 2001, the Patriot Act passed days after 9/11. In 2002, the Information Awareness Office was created. Oh, I'm sure that's when it was created. Yep. In 2003, people figured out it had this symbol and it was called the Information Awareness Office. And so they just renamed it the Terrorism Information Awareness Office. And then people were still upset about it, so they defunded it. But of course, it just continued under the code name basketball. I guess they were going for the slam dunk. That's all I get. I don't know. So, according to a top secret accounting dated January 9th, 2013, the NSA's Acquisitions Directorate sends millions of records every day from the internal Yahoo and Google networks, I should say like May God networks or something, to data warehouses at the agency's headquarters at where? Not Bluffdale, Fort Meade, Maine? I think that's Maine. Maryland. Okay, I'm sorry. Oh, I have it written here, Maryland. Okay. In the preceding 30 days, the report said field collectors had processed and sent back 181 million new records, including metadata, which would indicate who sent or received emails and when, as well as content such as text, audio, and video. Basically, just everything about the file, where it's been, who it was sent to, who it came from, and what's in it. Everything. There's nothing else. They got everything. Now, this number is actually really low. They've got a couple of programs. And this is from the Washington Post. We'll go over that number a little later. So how does it work? They actually physically tap into the fiber optic lines. So, because, you know, like even if you're using your cell phone, yeah, it's not plugged into a wire, obviously, but the tower you're connected to is. There's just fiber optic cables. So, and then they all go through these central nodes that point everything in directions. And I don't know, I assume the system builds on each other like some kind of crazy behemoth. So basically they go to the main lines and they cut the fiber optic cable and they rejoin it and with their trap, which we looked at earlier, that was authorizing them to put that trap anywhere they wanted in the United States. It's an information trap. So basically it just taps into the line, everything just like raw data just goes into the NSA data center. And then it makes a copy of it. And so it doesn't really slow anything down, I believe. And then it just goes wherever it's going and back and forth, et cetera, et cetera. So some of their code names they've given that for some reason we know to these things. So they have muscular, which is about collecting data. Prism, which is about collecting data in a different way through their various radical warrants. Then you have Incisor, which is an interpretation program. So it collects the data and analyzes it, just, you know, figures out what to do with it. Same thing with Turmoil, or they claim there's another one called like Pinwheel. That one's supposed to be about terrorists specifically. So in a single month, these programs alone that we know of are capable of collecting tens of billions of all that data I told you about. So you're sending a text to your wife and you're like, hey, I'm hungry. You got dinner? And she's like, yeah, it's steaming hot. For some reason, the NSA, they want that data. They have it. So they got it all. So a data point is like a package. So anyway, as far as I can tell, it doesn't look like anything goes between. And this system they have is actually works in conjunction with, I don't know, it's got some stupid acronym, but it's in England. So this system here monitors and collects and combines everything, both in America and England and Europe. In Europe. Let's see. So I always like trying to make things personal, like I said at the beginning. So they built in 2014, they built this data center in Bluffdale. There's a good chance you've driven by it and you might not even have realized it. And so there's Thanksgiving Point over on the right. I don't know what that is, 5 miles or something. Anyway, if you want to go there, there's the address to the entrance. 2700 North Redwood Road, Bluffdale, Utah. I can believe it. I don't know. I haven't been to the entrance. I don't really have any, I don't want to do the Area 50 run, like the anime run in, whatever they're calling it. Anyway. So now what I said earlier about like companies pretending, no, we don't want to give them our data. So it's this big struggle. Yeah, it's just a lie. Okay. So some of the examples that was built in 2014. Right here, before it was completed, which by the way, was like the fastest government construction project I have ever seen. It was like a year and a half or something. They got that massive thing up. They're working overtime. Like clearly somebody was like, well, we have to actually build this, right? You can't just say you're going to build it for this and then cause problems and charge us 3 times as much before it's done and done terribly. They did it really terribly fast. So, because they had a bunch of fires allegedly and stuff. I don't know, who cares? I wish it would burn to the ground. So 2013, Google Fiber coming to Provo's Silicon Slopes. So Google's planning, they're like, oh, we're gonna put fiber optic major network running right by the data center. Ooh, I wonder what they're gonna do with that. Right, here we go, Silicon Slopes opens headquarters in Lehigh. So this is like the copy of Silicon Valley in California. They're trying to do that here. That's one of the reasons why they have that big gravel pit at point of the mountain, is they're trying to like merge the 2 areas together into like one mega city, which will help them culturally combine everything. This is part of that program. So they want to have a Silicon Valley here and they're calling it Silicon Slopes, probably because I guess we got more mountains. So, and if we look at this, we've got, well, the picture's kind of dark, but trust me, Herbie the Wonder Hamster is there, former Governor Herbert. Right next to him, you have Cox. Yep. What's his name? Caillou. We got Governor Caillou over there, and also in this we have the Lehigh Chamber of Commerce, and of course some board members of the Silicon Slopes. I'm sure the Lehigh Chamber of Commerce attendees are just delegates of the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce, which is really kind of in charge of a lot of things. So, and then of course, you heard about this recently. That was this year, Facebook data center. Oh, geez, Facebook just decided to open a data center in Eagle Mountain, like, 10 miles away. Gee, I wonder why they did that. I'm sure it doesn't mean anything. It's just like, anyway, it's ridiculous, right? They put all their infrastructure around the data center. It's not complicated. So now we saw this a little earlier with the tailored information about the face masks. We're going to kind of pull that in a little bit. I want you to know what this guy says. So he was the CEO of Google from 2001 to 2011. He also was the executive chairman for Alphabet, which is the umbrella company for Google. Basically all the rest of the time with some other stuff like that between 2011 and now. So he's
before that worked here at Novell and ran Novell.
Lovely. The connections never stop. I'm told, I have trusted sources. They told me that before this, he worked at Novell here in Salt Lake.
My client is the owner of Nobel, and he confirmed that he used the word.
I also have a trusted source that said there's confirmation for that.
I work for him, I'm telling you the truth.
Okay, no, I'm just letting you know. All the people on the internet can't hear you. So now it's in the video. Okay, so he said this thing. When you use Google, you get more than one answer. Of course you do. That's a bug. We should be able to give you the right answer just once. We should know what you meant. You should look for information. We should give it to you exactly right. We should give it to you in your language, and we should never be wrong. So, do face masks work? We got our psychographics profile on both the user and the potential content you're going to be looking for. It's automatically analyzed by some kind of machine. Look at that. Kind of looks like one search result, doesn't it? That's what you're getting. Everyone's getting, you know, when you go to somebody during this fake pandemic and you were like, you were so at odds with some crazy person. They were like, no, of course, how could you even think that? They are literally getting the information given to them to make them think that way. And the things that they need to know in order to free their mind in any capacity are being from them. So, and this system is getting better every day. So it's a blatant fact that the conspiracy is collecting and analyzing you as an individual. It's not known if or how much the NSA shares with Google, Apple, Yahoo, and others. For now, it looks like psychographics is limited to platforms. Like if you use the DuckDuckGo search engine, but never use the Google search engine, or maybe if you use the Google Chrome and Gmail together, that really enhances things for their algorithms. There is very little to no sharing of information between the separate companies. That's kind of what it looks like right now on the way they're working. Just a few pieces of stored data on your machine in the form of cookies, if you're aware of that, might help with that. And kind of seems like Facebook seems to pull stuff pretty well. But the potential of psychographics is even more frightening. So we have some examples like China's social credit system ranks citizens and punishes them with throttled internet speeds and flight bans if the Communist Party deems them untrustworthy. They've got this app called WeChat for some insane reason. My brother lived in China for 5 years. There's more users on WeChat than people alive in the United States. And the government is heavily involved. Basically, they just ban keywords and stuff when something's going on. They don't want people to talk about it. So, and people do try to do weird things like do a picture of weird animals that represent stuff and whatever. But yeah, and it's like an instant messaging app with a tiny Facebook. It's kind of weird. Really convenient though, if you're into it, being totally controlled. Yeah, so here's another Chinese student, university enrollment suspended due to father's poor social credit score. However, I have to argue that was probably for that guy's benefit, not going to their system. And, we've seen this on Facebook. The psychographic thing on Facebook, it's analyzing posts. It's figuring out what stuff that post is trying to say. And then it does or doesn't want people to see certain things. So they've been pretty bad. So, and of course, the social credit score is actually really bad in the bigger cities. Not since I've been there, I guess in like Shanghai and stuff. They won't let you board a subway to go around the city if you have a bad social credit score. So they'll look at your stuff like WeChat or whatever. And if you're saying things they don't like, then they'll kind of start picking away at you. So, but there's some other things that work. We have these like vaccine passports, get your free donut. All you got to do is give us your soul. Oh, by the way, we were going to give you a free donut anyway. So we've got these digital driver's licenses that seem to be coming, right? Please never shop at Harmon's. There's 5G, which is really bad at penetrating concrete and walls and roofs and stuff, but it's really good at geographically figuring out where you are, like down to the inch. So they know where they want to know where you're going. Here's another weird thing. Most people don't know your smart meter. If you live in a house, the chances that there's not a smart meter on it are very tiny. So this actually sends data wirelessly to the power company like a gajillion times a second or whatever. So they know through power signatures of equipment that you're using in your house, like when you're watching the TV, when you're doing the dishes, running the dishwasher, when you're doing your laundry. When maybe you start like a compressor in your garage to maybe fill up your tires. When you're going to bed, there's all these signatures of the power usage that creates oscillations in the system they can measure. And so they can actually get a fundamental idea of how you're walking around your house. Tell me that's not insane. So, and then of course, Facebook just sucks so much data and manipulates you. And we don't need to talk about them, right? But of course, there's even more. Now we're getting into some other additional weird stuff that this evil woman said. The US Central Bank has been tested, that's the Federal Reserve, has been testing distributed ledger technologies over the past several years to study what a digital currency might do to the existing payments, ecosystem, monetary policy, and financial stability of the banking sector. The title of this article is called "The Federal Reserve is Experimenting with a Digital Dollar." Now, this is actually a lie. They are not testing distributed ledger technologies. That would be the opposite of what they do, which is centralized information. So what they're actually testing is cryptocurrency. So they're trying to confuse people on it. Most people don't understand the difference between anyway, but because a lot of people are like, oh, Bitcoin, that's freedom. That's another subject. But so just to back up what she said, let's go, this act did not pass, but this was sitting around probably as like a trial balloon, just to see what people would think about it. And kind of some predictive pre-programming. So in this, the Banking for All Act, digital dollar wallets. This is just pulled right from the thing. The term digital dollar wallet means a digital wallet or account maintained by a Federal Reserve bank on behalf of any person for the purpose of holding digital dollar balances. So first of all, there's no distributed ledger. It's all centralized in a bank. So we're done talking about that, right? And part of this thing, what it was supposed to do was if you want to get your COVID funny money, they were going to give you a digital wallet and you get it through that. And then you're like, well, what's a digital wallet? How do I even use that? No, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't make any sense until you know how easy it is to use your digital wallet that they'll give you. These little chips, they're saying that these are for increased security, but that's stupid because there's still a magnet stripe on your card. That's like building an extra door in your house and then claiming it's more secure. You still have the old doors. Like it doesn't matter. This is a little chip designed to do computations. So right now, it's being used to keep track of you much better. Every type of business actually has like a code with it for what type of business it is. And if it's the right kind of code, then they'll use that data to analyze your purchase as part of your psychographics profile. So they know what you're buying and where you're buying it. And this is actually, I mean, they admit it. This isn't secret. We can keep track of everything you do as a consumer, and we are keeping track. This is the director of Utah Office of Tourism. She said that in 2016 in some press conference. Did I mention she's evil? I just like to mention people who are evil. So they're going to take such things as your vaccine passport and your good citizen number, probably derived a lot from Facebook. This is the future, right? It's not happening right now. Well, some of it is. Some of it is happening right now. So, and they're going to get where you're going. They know where you're going. They got the data. They know what you're buying, right? Most people don't carry cash anymore. And they're going to put all that in your psychographic profile. And they're going to use that information to, eventually tell you who you can talk with, restrict what you can buy, your driverless car, see if you can give you permission to use it or not, move around and where you can go. They'll probably all tie it into some kind of digital ID. So now, I assure you this will be done by a computer program that is automated, an automated computer program. And if you ever have a problem, the customer service will be abysmal. I have no doubt of that. With the system fully automated, the conspiracy will not need tanks and ranks of soldiers patrolling the street. We will be in a form of digital martial law where very few control the very many, like never before in the history of the planet. So these Satanists are mostly illegally stealing your data. Most of it's illegal, some of it's not, but most of it is. They shouldn't have it anyway. Government doesn't get data without a warrant, basically, with few exceptions. And then they are using that information to put into your psychographic profile, and they're interpreting that data in order to control you. And this is kind of seems to be getting worse every day. So, but what if you find a way around this enormous evil and it becomes popular? Well, the conspiracy is working on that too. They kind of want to get pesky humans out of the way. That seem to be a lot of people doing their bidding for them, but why have them around when we can not have them around? So they're going to try to sell you. They're going to say there's like artificial intelligence, even though there actually isn't, and I hope there never is. And we got all these robots. They're trying to tell you that robots are like, oh, they're going to open the door for your grandma or go into some building that's hazardous. Oh, it's for the blind. Oh, look at these robots. They dance. Oh, it's so good. Oh, look how amazing these robots are. So we've got these cool gals, and then we got these dancing robots. Look how awesome robots are. I know you guys love robots. That's this is the propaganda that they're releasing. Like, our robots dance. They totally exist for your benefit. We're not freaking using them to kill people. Absolutely not. This was, what was it? Yeah, so this one right here, the New York Post. That was this year. They programmed an aerial drone to basically track a target, and when it decided that the right conditions were met, to just kill it, just go in. It was a quadcopter with explosives on it. I don't know, somewhere in the Middle East or whatever. So, and it did it all by itself, do what they told it to do. And they're using this metadata, which is the part of the file that says where it's coming from, where it's going. So they're just tracking the guy's cell phone in his pocket. And they go, oh, there he is. Okay, let's go. Let's kill him. Oh, I pressed the wrong button. We got this one here. New York Police Department deploys a robot dog again. They're using that robot dog as like basically a speaker. So some guy was like all crazy and I'm gonna do cocaine or something, and they said, oh, we're negotiated with the guy and talked down, and they arrest him or whatever. So I think this is what they want. I mean, this is not a real image, but I think that's what they want. They want robotic soldiers to just do whatever they want. They would be like automated. They don't have to do it. They're just like, this is the people you're looking for, and just go after them. Abysmal customer service. Here's an interesting one. So a couple of months ago, a couple of guys, they bought one of these dogs from Boston Dynamics. It's called Spot, by the way. I got to give it a cute name, right? The plan that they did, this is a $70,000 robot. They bought this robot. They put a paintball gun on him. They made a art gallery, like a fake art gallery, and they popularized this event for a while. They said, hey, during these times, you can log into our website and control Spot remotely. Yes, you get to control the paintball gun. And Boston Dynamics didn't want them to do this so bad that they called these guys and they said, we will give you 2 free spots if you cancel this event. We give you 2 of these $70,000 robots. Just don't do it. They said, no, we're going to do it. So in summary, the real story is the events of September 11th, 2001, were manufactured. It's a manufactured event for evil intents. The Patriot Act was passed to implement psychographics in the United States and across the world. This was the infrastructure for the fourth industrial revolution. Psychographics and the transformative power they enable are affecting you right now. When you're going online, they're hurting you right now. And psychographics are improving seemingly every day. They're getting better. I mean, the machine is only as good as the data they get and what they decide to do with it and how to automate it. So, probably want to know what you can do about it. So once you know something is propaganda, it's not really effective. You know, if it didn't matter what you think and how you behave, then the conspiracy wouldn't waste all this time trying to convince you of things. They're creating a whole system to do this in an automated process. So just by knowing something is propaganda, that's a really good start. Some of the solutions you can do is you can nullify this. You can get a de-Googled phone. You can even use all kinds of apps from the Google store. As long as you don't log in and tell it who you are, you're basically an anonymous profile. They don't know where to plug it in. You can get a Google phone. That's a de-Googled phone. So there are resources out there. I should have posted some, but I kind of forgot. So you shouldn't go along with their thing. You know, you should try and use cash. That's another good way to nullify. Don't go along with their agenda. One thing, recognize what is evil. So most people, there's a lot of hard truths out there and it's like, oh, that's so crazy. That's like so big. And like, well, you know, there's kind of a chain of custody on this evidence. It's not really that, it's just hard to recognize and go around it, like using cash. I'm just repeating myself. Here's another one. Do not respect false property rights. So like Harmon's, for example, they did a mask mandate for the store. They're all religious about it. People go, well, that's their right. Well, no, these people are like active participants in the conspiracy. They're freaking Satanists. They gave up their property rights when they decided to do all these evil things. When the founding fathers did the Boston Tea Party, they weren't like, oh man, we got to make sure we don't throw this tea in the harbor. No, of course, they threw the tea in the harbor. Those people were guilty of being complicit with the conspiracy's agenda. And we can go into that. I'm not going to go into that, but there's a history to that. But just you don't let them try to use this to destroy your efforts. No, somebody is evil. They don't have those rights anymore. They're doing evil things. Just because I have a baseball bat doesn't mean I get to hit you over the head with it. Like, oh, it's private property. You can do whatever I want with it. So, and of course, you need to be educated on both liberty and how the conspiracy works. There's a lot of people out there, they're educated on liberty, but they don't understand the evil around them and how it works. Conspiracy makes a lot of false friends. Try to make you think that there's people that are for freedom that aren't, and their goal is to just waste your time or even make you work for the conspiracy. And I don't know why I did that. You need teamwork. You're not going to do it alone. I don't know why I skipped everything. Okay, I skipped everything. So you need a team. Because you're not going to do it alone. You're not going to be successful if you're by yourself. That's a good part of where Defending Utah comes in. We do have chapters across the state we're working with. We're starting to build in significance where we can start putting boots on the ground. A few people who are excellently educated, employing targeted means can be radically effective. Just a few people in a neighborhood can cause all kinds of problems for the conspiracy at the least. So, and it is our duty to uphold the freedom that God gave us. It is a sacred duty. And with that, I thank you for coming here, and this concludes our presentations.
Thank you, everyone, for being here, for supporting.
That took too long. Probably took too long.
More round of applause for Kevin and Erica.
That took a while.
And then they started late too. So we're taking 2 hours.
Huh? A little over 2 hours. Was it? We start late.
guys can read this in the future, in these dark times. Anyone might be able to be firm in standing for freedom, but also remember humility and working with our friends and families, members who are caught in the conspiracy. We're good for the men and women who sacrifice before us. Maybe we have the same vigor and conviction to sacrifice our lives if needs be. I want to say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
That was just